Here we go. Good evening, everyone. I do believe we are live. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's good to have you with us. I say tonight, we've got people from all over the world joining us today. And yeah, it's awesome to have you on. I can't believe we're talking Comrades 2017 already. Yeah, it's not too long to go now. Nerves are starting to build. And yeah, I think tonight's going to be absolutely amazing. So a massive, massive welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for taking time out to spend the next hour and a bit with us. Who are we? Well, my name is Brad Brown. I'm going to be your host this evening and just making sure that everything pulls together from a tech perspective. But we've got the Comrades Marathon coach, the official Comrades Marathon coach with us tonight as well, Lindsay Parry. Lindsay, welcome.
Thanks, Brad. Can't believe we are doing another year of webinars as we approach another Comrades Marathon. It's good stuff.
And Lindsay, you've been pretty busy. Last week, I think, was the first week of the Bonitas Road shows. So you were out and about in Joburg last week. This week, I think you're going to be in Pretoria, and then in 2 weeks in Cape Town. So we'll chat a bit more about that. But yeah, you're getting to see lots of runners face to face.
Yeah, it's been good. So far, we've had a couple of awesome shows. And the ladies' seminars start on Saturday in Pretoria as well. I believe there's still a couple of spots up for that one. And that's always a really cool roadshow where we focus on the ladies in particular. So yeah, we're in full swing and trying to just get as much information out as quickly as possible because we are about 5 months from race day.
Yeah, and it happens quickly from here. So just to run through what we're going to go through tonight and some housekeeping to get out of the way first of all so we can get down to the nitty-gritty, because that's why you're all here, is as always, questions and comments are welcome. So you'll see there's a little chat box on the software that we use at any time. Feel free to pop a question in there or a comment. Hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them tonight. We also often see that there are a lot of duplicates, people asking the same sort of questions, so we'll try and get through all of those this evening. And our goal is to finish speaking before you finish listening. So what are you going to learn tonight? Obviously the first thing is where should you be right now, what you need to do for the next 4 weeks, how to plan your races, because that's pretty important in the build-up to Comrades, and also how important is seeding. So, Lindsay, I'm going to let you take over because people don't want to hear me speaking. They want to hear from you. And, yeah, we can just chop and change in between and add a few questions as we go. So I know the first thing you wanted to do was touch a little bit about where we are now.
Yeah, and I think we've scratched the surface of that already in our chat. We are 5 months away from race day. It's probably a little bit early still to be obsessing and focusing too much on Comrades. So we will want to be setting a couple of short-term goals, something that's going to keep the training consistent and get you into a pattern of training and lay the foundation for your Comrades training. And I guess that sums up pretty well where we are now, and that is that we want to be consistent, we want to be training. Hopefully we've qualified, or certainly are about to qualify in the next couple of weeks. And this whole period is about building us up and landing us on the 1st of March, ready to train. You should be trained now, but when I say ready to train, ready to do the peak mileage that you need to do between March and April, because really, and I'll repeat this when we get to those webinars, really, Comrades is all about March and April. If you have a good March and April, you're going to have a fantastic Comrades, and hopefully as we go through the webinar tonight, we will then lay the platform for ensuring that you are injury-free, that you remain healthy, and that you get in those very special months of March and April so that you go on and have a successful Comrades.
Lindsay, if I could just add something here too, and I'm sure you'd agree, we're going to get lots of questions, and I've seen a couple have come through on email already of people asking about race day strategies and what should they be doing on race day. And the truth of the matter is, if you don't take care of the next 4 weeks, race day is not going to matter. We need to really focus on what we need to focus on now. So I don't want to get too much into the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen on race day, particularly with the questions. I don't know how you feel about that, if you're good with that, because we are going to cover that closer to race day.
No, look, absolutely. And I think one of the important things that's probably good to establish right up front is that one of the factors that people who don't finish Comrades cite, and we know this because we've done a survey on specifically the runners who don't finish, is that they cite mental burnout. And if you're going to start planning how you're going to run Comrades today, 5 months out, then by the time you get to Comrades, you're literally going to be Comrades out. So yes, you are training for Comrades now. Yes, you must never forget that you're training for Comrades, because that little bit of fear and tension in your tummy will get you out of bed in the morning. But we really need to focus now on the short-term things that we need to take care of, and keep ourselves healthy and fit and building up to the all-important March and April. So, look, there will be plenty of time to talk about race day. And I think from April, once we've done our webinar, which covers the Comrades long run, from then onwards, it literally will all be about Comrades. And so there will be an entire month for you to think about, plan, ask questions, and obviously we'll have a final webinar 2 weeks out where we'll really answer those questions in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lindsay, before we get into focusing on the next 4 weeks, I think let's get to a couple of questions. There are a few coming through. One in particular about the training programs, and I just want to put it out there. I'll give you the link a little bit later on in this webinar as well, where you can get Lindsay's training programs. They're available for free on the Comrades website. So if you go to comrades.com and then just click on the top menu bar, there's a little tab that says training. It'll take you to there, and you can choose the training program you want to go on. But a question from, and I hope I pronounce it right, Vidang Murphy. Vidang saying, is your time-based plan okay for slower runners?
So look, this is actually a great question, and the answer is yes. But I am going to qualify it slightly. But the whole point of the time-based program is quite simply that it caters for a very wide variety of runners. And then the second important thing about time-based programs, and that is where, and in this instance, it's also important for slower runners, is that time-based programs tend to stop people from focusing on how quickly they cover a distance, and they find it easier to follow instructions like easy run, long run, and so on. And look, this is a discovery that I've made over the last 3 or 4 years, and unfortunately, in my post-mortems and stumbling across this, it was before, or should I say, I wrote the programs before I came to this realization that the one area where the time-based stuff has a shortcoming is in the actual long runs. So I realized that the very slow runners are not getting enough miles on their legs on the long run, but that is the only run. So you will find and I need to get on the websites and actually make that change so that people can see it, because what you need to do is you need to run a lot of 30K training runs and a couple that are longer than that. And I think with the time-based programs, a lot of the slower guys are doing loads of 20 to 25K runs, but you really do need to get into those 30s and get into some 20 milers for those that are coming in from North America. And just that the long run volume needs to be just that little bit longer. But for the rest, the time-based stuff still serves its purpose. It is there to stop people from overtraining. It is there to stop people from pushing too hard on their easy runs.
Cool stuff. Lindsay, another great question, and I'm going to sort of put a bit of a disclaimer in here. I am going to chat about it a little bit towards the end of the webinar too, and I probably should have put it up front. And one of the big, and this is just from me looking on the outside, is one of the big mistakes I see people make, and I think Lindsay does too, is they sort of pick and choose the advice that they want to take. So there's lots of people out there who are, and I put it in air quotes, Comrades coaches, and they're dishing out training programs left, right, and center. But what I would suggest is find and I'm not saying they're good or they're bad. All I'm saying is find someone that you can relate to, and whether it be Lindsay or whether it be someone else, and stick to that person's advice. Don't go cherry picking advice to suit what you want to hear, if that makes sense. So my suggestion would be go onto the Comrades website, get one of Lindsay's training programs, and sell out to Lindsay for the next 5 months. If you have any questions, come to Lindsay, get those questions answered. Because there's lots of philosophies when it comes to training for Comrades, and just because one coach says one thing doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but it might not fit into the other coach whose training program you're following's philosophy. So, and the reason I'm telling you this is here's a great question, Lindsay, and it's one we get asked every single year. Somebody's asking, is 2 marathons and 1 ultra enough for an uprun?
Yes, so look, in my opinion, for the bulk of the field, and remember when we go around the country and we're talking to people, we really have to cater these things for the bulk of the field. So 5% of Comrades starters will run a silver medal. Okay, on the uprun, it's a little less than 5%. So for a silver runner, the answer to that question is no, it's not enough. You probably need to run between 5 and 6 times between marathon and I'd say around 50, possibly 55 Ks. 25% of the field will get a Bull Roan. So for a Bull Roan, is 2 marathons and an ultra enough? The answer is yes, but probably 2 marathons and 2 ultras, shorter ultras of 50 Ks is probably good for your Bull Roan too. For everybody else, and that's 75% of the field, more than that it is too much. So what I typically tell, my advice that I give is to do 3 runs of 42 Ks and longer. So whether that's 2 marathons and 1 ultra, or 1 marathon and 2 ultras, 3 runs of over 42 Ks is enough for Comrades. And the important thing is to spread them out by 3 to 4 weeks. So if you do that, if you spread them out by 3 to 4 weeks, we know we're going to do a long run of about 55 kilometers 5 to 6 weeks before Comrades. So that puts us in towards the end of April, which means that we then should be running another marathon or ultra towards the end of March. And then that means that we should be running another marathon between the last week of February and the first week of March. So spread out like that, you are more or less going to be doing a run of 42 or longer each month between now and Comrades, and that is plenty for that 75% of the field.
Cool. Lindsay, quick question in, and there were 2 of them. One had to do with the Sarans Marathon. Let me just find it. Someone was asking about what is the last, it's on Elise, let me open it up quick. It's saying, what is the last qualifier you had worked towards? We've earmarked 5th of March Vaal Marathon. Is this too late? And somebody was asking, where's the Sarans Marathon question gone? There we go. Samantha is asking, says, I've pegged Sarans as on the 12th of March as my first 42. Is that too late? Should they be doing a marathon earlier?
Look, it's not too late. It's pushing the edge of what is sensible in terms of chasing a seeding. So we're jumping a little bit ahead in terms of one of the things I wanted to chat tonight. Qualifying, to be honest, you can leave all the way up until May if you like. I mean, the thing about qualifying is that when you qualify determines how you should approach the race. So again, depending on where you fall on the spectrum of a marathon, whether you are capable of running a 3-hour or whether you scratch in under 5 hours, will affect the advice that I'm giving you now. But for Vaal, which most people use to improve their seeding, and that is not a good idea. Why isn't it a good idea? Because you're going to run a hard marathon 1 week into March. And what is March? March is peak Comrades training. So if you're going to use March as it should be used, but you do a qualifier on the 7th of March, then you need a week to recover. Now we're 2 weeks in. So you've just eaten up 2 weeks of your most important Comrades training time. If you are a very marginal sub-5 athlete, you don't have the luxury of running an easy marathon as a qualifier or jogging a marathon as a qualifier. So if you're a 3-hour, 3.5-hour marathon, a 4-hour marathon, then sure, go and qualify at the easier race, but don't go there chasing your seeding, because then you have to recover. And if you do go there chasing a seeding, then it is much more important to recover than it is to start training. because otherwise you're never actually going to get into that proper groove that you need to get into March and April, because you're always going to be tired and you're quite possibly going to be sore, and that's going to lead you to getting injured. So no, my preferred choice is that, and there were 11,000 people running Johnson Crane this weekend. No, they weren't all in the marathon, but this is a much more sensible time of year to qualify. When Comrades moves back to the middle of June, which it may well be doing from 2018, well then Vol is probably not at a bad time, because it actually means then run your marathon, recover, and then get into proper training. So yeah, the short answer for me is do them as training / qualifying runs, unless you have to run them hard because you're a marginal qualifier, but then make sure that you recover afterwards. That's the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, the pictures from Johnson Crane this weekend were amazing. The Benoni City Marathon, it's one of the world majors, Lindsay, isn't it?
It felt like it. There were so many people.
Okay, cool. Lindsay, let's get back to what you wanted to run through. You're going to run through the next 4 weeks for the different medals, what people should be focusing on. We've had quite a few questions with regards to pacing at what each of the medals should be running at. So I know it's not on the slide, but I don't know if you want to add that in as you go, like what your recommended pacing would be for the various runs in the training program. So yeah, let's start with the next 4 weeks and the finishers medals, the Vic Claphams.
Cool. So look, the advice across the 4 medals is similar in a lot of instances, but the reason why I like to still run through it is there are a couple of subtle but important differences, but also the repetition is good. You know, the more you hear this, the more likely it is to stick, and the more likely you are to follow the advice. Okay, so there are literally 2 avenues now. I mean, if you've just qualified, then this is the time that you should be recovering a bit, making sure any niggles that you perhaps picked up through the training, that you deal with them now. If there's any sort of rehab advice to be taken and had, you want to deal with that now, and then you'll gradually crank your training up again over the next 4 weeks, so that you land yourself on the 1st of March like ready to train, with a body that's ready to handle it. If you still need to qualify, then this is a period where you're going to be training reasonably hard and gearing yourself up to a qualifier. Hopefully it's happening quite soon. So there's literally every week, there's a marathon pretty much every weekend up until the end of February. So hopefully wherever you are in the country, you are doing that, and hopefully the last weekend of February is the last time you will plan on running a hard marathon. Obviously, if you've qualified, that means that you've had a fairly good start to the year, and once you've allowed your body to recover from that effort of the marathon, then you really want to maintain what's been a good start to the year, ticking over, and as I said, just slowly building up, so that when you hit March, you are flat out and ready to train. The one thing about the finishers that is quite different to the rest is that I seldom advocate speed work for the runners that fall in this group. And so if you are doing speed work, or you want to do speed work, my advice to you is to really proceed with caution. Start with very few repetitions. Make sure that you're not overdoing the actual intensity of that session, because speed work in particular, speed work full stop, is your highest risk for acute injury. But in this group, it's a particularly high risk, because biomechanically you will experience much greater forces, your recovery is slower, and you also tend to be a more inexperienced running group, so less miles on the leg, so on and so forth. So at this stage, it's all about being consistent, maintaining your start to the year, and gearing up for March. Obviously, as I said, if you've got that marathon, you are going to go through it and do it, and then you just need to recover.
Okay.
Moving into the... Yes.
Before you jump onto the bronze, just a question on here. Marika Duplessis was saying the speeds for the finishers program are quite slow. If I'm not mistaken, you need to be faster than 7 minutes a K to qualify, but the program stipulates 7:20 to 7:40. Well, Marika, it's 7:06. I've done the maths on what you need to do to qualify sub 5 because that's where I hang out all the time. But I think it's a valid question, Lindsay.
Yeah, so one of the biggest limiters in performance is people who train at race pace. Okay, so there isn't a medal or a runner in the successful runner in the world that trains at their race pace. So the world the or does their long runs and their easy runs at race pace. Let me qualify that. So the marathon world record stands at 2:03 and some change. Which, if you do the maths, is under 3 minutes a K for 42 Ks. They don't do long runs under 3 minutes a K. The guys that are in that league, in fact, relatively will do slower runs than what you do if we had to put it on a relative scale. Similarly, for a sub 3 hour marathon, that requires someone to run 42 Ks at 4 minutes and 15, 16 seconds per K. Most of the training runs for somebody going for a sub 3 marathon will be in the region of 440 to 450 per K. So all of our long, slow runs are relatively slower than our race pace, and that is so for a number of reasons, not least of which is that our bodies literally cannot withstand the eccentric load or the impact forces that you experience if you were to run around at race pace all the time. The other thing that happens is that you just physically will get exhausted, and that's why I say one of the biggest mistakes amateur runners and people who are self-coached make is that they run a lot of their Ks at quite close to their threshold or quite close to their marathon race pace. And while that can lead to good short-term gains in fitness, what generally tends to happen is it just means that by the time you get to 30 kilometers, you have dead legs, and they will not do what you want them to do. So yes, you are right. A lot of those Ks are slower. You can do once a week a time trial. So on the finishers program, doing a 5K time trial or a 5K park run or something that really revs your engine, that is a good idea. But those long runs that are run at that pace are specifically gearing up your physiology to be able to provide you with energy over a long period of time and to allow you to sustain that 7 minutes a K over a long period of time.
Cool stuff. Let's talk the bronze medal, Lindsay.
Right, so these are the 9 to 11 hour guys. So I think that's around about 7 minutes per K for the actual Comrades. I think the training paces it's going to be quite a broad range. Your training paces are going to range from early 6 minutes to late to mid 7 minutes a K in your training run, so depending where you fall on the spectrum. And again, we fall into the same categories here. There are people that have qualified, and that's great. There's a little bit of pressure off them, but don't be tempted to get stuck into the training too quickly after that qualified. Get consistent. So I'm certainly not suggesting that you don't train, but don't build the mileage up too quickly if you've qualified. Get back into your groove, get consistent, get your routine going again, and then gradually build up through February so that you're ready for the 1st of March. If you still need a qualifier, this group, quite a broad band, 9 to 11 hours. So, those that are closer to a 3:40 marathon will probably be doing a little bit more speed work, and their bodies will handle that a little bit better. But just, again, caution, do speed work appropriately. Don't go and start with 10 400s, run at the fastest you can possibly run a 400. Your speed work needs to be done a little bit quicker than your 5K race pace. Start with a few repetitions and build that up. And then moving to the closer you get to a 4.5 hour, 4:20 marathon, the less I recommend that speed work. if you haven't done it before. So if you are a fairly experienced runner and you have done speed work in the past, then it's okay, because some speed work is good. But if you haven't done much, then the same advice will apply to the question I answered now. Rather do a time trial, rather do a 5K park run. Much lower risk of injury, but it gives you a much lower risk of injury, but it gives you that speed. And then again, once you've done the marathon, ultimately you do need to take a break. You need to recover. So whenever that marathon is, whether it's the beginning of February, middle of February, end of February, you need to take that break. And then once you've taken that break, you can't just throw yourself straight into full mileage. You've got to build it up again. So if we go back to the Vol Marathon and you choose the Vol Marathon, you're going to take a week off. So it means it's the middle of February and then March, and then you're going to take those 2 weeks to get back up to full speed. And it means that you'll probably, instead of having a good 8 weeks at peak mileage, you're rather going to have 6, something along those lines. Right, moving to the Bull Row. Now we're getting to a lot faster. So that's a 7.5 hour to a 9 hour Comrade. So these typically tend to be the people that are close to 3 hours in a marathon. And so their training paces will be somewhere in the region of 4:40 to 5 minutes a K. And then the guys that are up to about 3.5 hours in the marathon, and so their training paces will be closer to kind of 5:15 to 5:40 in that region. Again, and look, the better an athlete you are in terms of your ability, almost the earlier that I prefer people to qualify. So this sort of group, the Bill Rowan and Silver, they also tend to be slightly more experienced runners. So the guys that I work with in this group, I try and encourage them to qualify at the end of the previous year, so that during this period of time, actually, all we're doing is laying down a really good, solid base for the Comrades training. And while we're working on that base, we also work on speed, and that's very specific to the uprun. So in the uprun, I work on speed now and try and get the guys as fast as possible. It's still important to do speed work the right way, but this is a group that is far less risk of picking up those acute injuries, and that's why on the slide it says building speed. However, if you haven't qualified yet, then I would be a little bit cautious already on my qualifying strategy. So everywhere you look, and all the advice you hear from me will say, if you don't run a sub 3 hour marathon, you are unlikely to run a silver. Now the reality is you can go fairly close to a silver or to a 3 hour, knowing that if you'd gone for it flat out, you would have been just about there, perhaps missed it by a little bit. So during this period of time, I'd say, if you haven't qualified yet, you're probably chasing more like a 3:05 to a 3:10, knowing there was still a little bit left in the tank. And then, for this medal, for this medal, the 3:10s, 3:15s are Bull Rowan. But so you'll want to be about 5-10 minutes slower, get your B seeding or get your C seeding if you're closer to the 3.5 hour, go just scrape under the 3:40 so that your recovery time is much shorter, and then you can get on with it, build up, because for Bill Rowan, March and April are very important. You need to train and get in good training volumes in March and April. This is a difficult medal to get. Obviously, there are a lot of people that are going for silver that will fall into the Bull Rowan, but for the people that are training specifically for Bull Rowan, it's a cracker of a medal, but it is not easy to get. You need to be ready to train in March and April. And then finally, the proper racing snakes. These are the 7.5 hours. Okay, again, if you've qualified, awesome. If you've qualified at the sub 3, brilliant. If you haven't qualified at the sub 3 yet, then I'll go back to the chat I was having on the previous slide. A 3:05, a 3:10 with something in the tank is good enough. You can run an 85-minute 21 to prove to yourself that you've got the speed required for the silver, without doing the damage of running that sub 3 hour marathon. And so I would be working quite hard on speed work through this period, and knowing that come March and April, the high mileage will begin, and then I'll obviously talk about some of the specifics that you'll be doing as we move through the March and April period. So yep, that's where we should be for the different medals.
Cool. Lindsay, a couple of questions coming through on speed work, asking, I mean, you've touched on it, and then the other one on hill work. Should people be doing hill work now? And strength work, should they be doing it? If so, when should they be doing it in the program, and what should they be doing?
So strength work, I always feel, is very good complementary training for any runner that's training for a race of this length. Even more so if you're a novice, and tons of people do Comrades, or they start running to do Comrades. So that kind of means that if you have got a bit of spare time, strength training should be almost compulsory, but we are training for a running race, and so if you don't have the time, then rather run than do strength training. When we talk about the down run, then I almost feel a little bit like some strength training is worth sacrificing a little bit of running for. But for the up run, you can get away with using hill work to build your strength, if you don't have time to get into the gym. At this particular period of the year, look, hill work and doing hill work is good for most training programs. It's much safer speed work than actually getting onto a track. But for the up run, I feel that the real time for hill training is in March and April. So the problem with doing a lot of hill work now already, if you do hill work January, February, March, April, it's really going to weigh on your mind, and the training is going to become stale. So I would push the hill training per se out a little bit more to March and April. And yes, if you do have time, get into the gym. The focus is obviously on the legs, but don't forget about your upper body. I mean, once you've done your first marathon or you do your first ultra, you will be amazed at how stiff your biceps get. Your whole body gets involved in the process of keeping you going and one foot in front of the other. So the focus will be legs, in particular quads and glutes, but we also want to do some work on our hamstrings, but runners tend to have disproportionately strong hamstrings to quads already. So the main work will be the quads, the glutes, a little bit in the hamstrings, and a bit of core work, and then I would advise that you do some upper body work.
Cool stuff. Lindsay, a couple of questions regarding Two Oceans. It's middle of April this year, and Marlene wanted to know, it's a bit of a joint question. Marlene wanted to know, should she do another marathon after Two Oceans in the build-up to Comrades? And then it was, let me see who asked the question. I think it's a good question to ask as well. Is from Dintwe. And Dintwe is saying that as March and April are the two big training months for Comrades, how doesn't Oceans hamper your Comrades training then? And I know you're a big one on not racing things hard, and using it as a training run is probably the key, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, you answered it exactly there. If you're going to race Two Oceans, then yes, absolutely, it's going to hamper, because you must take a week off to recover. So it falls right in the middle of your peak training. So Two Oceans is 7 weeks away from Comrades this year. So if you are going to look, it's a great race. If it's in your plans to run it, then I would encourage you to run it. And it means, though, that 3 weeks after that will be 4 weeks before Comrades. Now, 4 weeks before Comrades is a bit close for anyone slower than a Bill Rowan to be doing another really long run, and it's touch and go for a Bill Rowan. So for a Bill Rowan, I would be comfortable with a marathon to 45 Ks 4 weeks out. For everyone else, I would do a marathon 4 weeks out. So it would be Two Oceans at 7 weeks, a marathon at 4 weeks, and then for your silver guys, 2 oceans, and 3 weeks later another 50 to 55. But in answer, just to finish the question around 2 oceans and does it mess it up, if you run it easy and you do it as one of your long, slow, over 50k training runs, then it's absolutely fine. And the way you'll know that you ran it slowly enough is you'll have no stiffness whatsoever. You'll have slightly tired legs the following week, and you can perhaps schedule your training program to allow for a recovery week as opposed to a rest week. So you'll do slightly less mileage. I wouldn't do any high intensity running in the following week, but you should more or less feel by the middle of the week that you could have carried on with normal training.
Talking of being tired and sore after marathons, and I think this is a great question. Tracy said she qualified at Johnson Crane on Sunday, and obviously we're in the middle of marathon season and lots of people qualifying. She's saying, how many days should I rest before I start running again this week? And this applies to any marathon or ultra that you run, Lindsay.
Look, it doesn't apply to any marathon and ultra. It applies more strictly to those that you run hard. So if you run hard, you will have what we call DOMS, or delayed onset of muscular soreness. You will probably be stiff and tight the next day, but it won't be too bad. And then 2 days later, you'll feel really sore. And as one of my athletes, I sent him a message today to say, how are you feeling? He said, look, Brew, I don't want to go outside anymore. I feel bad because I feel like I'm mocking disabled people. So if you feel like you are really hobbling around and that's sore, then you need a full 3 days with no running, okay? At least. And you will only start running when you are pain-free. But after 3 days, if there's just a little bit of discomfort and it's not too bad, you can hop on a stationary bicycle and do some pedaling. Now, after a training ultra or training marathon, you shouldn't have any of those feelings. You may have a little bit of discomfort, and if you've got a little bit of discomfort, then I would encourage some cross training, some swimming, some cycling, maybe the elliptical, but not running. You only start running when you are completely pain-free.
Cool stuff. And then, Lindsay, someone was asking about the pace of races. Like they were asking, I can't find the question now, but they were asking about running. Can they race? Do they have to do all their long training runs at races? That's what they were saying. And what are your thoughts on racing every weekend?
Look, you don't have to, and you probably shouldn't. Just because the average person is a little bit of a A-type go-getter, competitive, even if you aren't A-type, people generally tend to be quite competitive. So that means in races, you will normally run a good 10 to 15 seconds per K faster than you should. So I actually discourage people from doing too many training runs at races. However, I do know quite a large number of people that literally do not care whether it's a race or whether they're on a training run, they will run the same pace. And if you have that sort of self-control, then it's great training at races, because then you get refreshments along the way. You very seldom have to run on your own, so you almost always have somebody to strike up a conversation with. So yeah, I mean, if you're that kind of person, then go for it. But if you get a little bit competitive with people in your actual club, or just generally get a bit competitive with yourself just because it's in a race, then I would advise to stay away from races and only do the odd one when you want to just have a look and see how your training's gone.
Okay, question in from Michael Kruspiek. How's it, Michael? Nice to have you on again. There's a few questions with regards to cross-training and what the best type of cross-training is, but Michael wanted to know, is indoor rowing a good form of strength training for Comrades?
It's an excellent form of strength training for Comrades, and especially for the up Comrades. Look, rowing is really hard on your quads, glutes, lower back if you're doing it properly. So yes, it's great training. It's great cross training and it's great strength training, but it is quite strenuous. So you would have to just check the balance, and that'll probably be with a little bit of trial and error. If you do too much of it, you're going to get a bit too tired and your running is going to suffer. So, yeah, it's excellent form of cross training.
We get this question every single year, and I'm going to make all our international runners day by asking it. Natasha saying, if it's raining quite heavily, will it be better to run on the treadmill or do a spinning or something like the stepper to try and stay on track? I remember last year, I think it was Jim who was coming up from Scotland who said if he didn't run in the rain, he would never run.
Yeah. Yeah, look, and it may run on Comrades race day, but that doesn't mean that we have to get out there in the rain every single time. Of course, it can be pleasant to run in the rain sometimes, but if there's thunder and lightning and it's a really heavy downpour, then like realistically, none of us are going to get out there and run. So then a treadmill becomes a very attractive option or alternative. And running on a treadmill is really, in terms of the physiological benefit, is just about as good as running. Whenever I answer this question, I always have to talk about Alberto Salazar. He's been in the news for all the wrong reasons of late, but great athlete, and he trained for and won Comrades almost exclusively training on a treadmill. He's in Oregon, and during the months where you need to be training for Comrades, it is under thick snow, and so he ran on a treadmill literally every step of his training for Comrades, and he came out and he won it. So training on a treadmill is a very good substitute for running on the road. It is just really psychologically taxing and really, really boring for some people, and other people don't seem to mind it. And if you don't have access to a treadmill, but you have access to some other form of cross training, then absolutely doing something is almost always going to trump doing nothing, unless that means that you overtraining and training every day. But you know, if you look at the weather forecast and you know that you can't just simply swap out a day because you're going to have 3-4 days of this weather, then jump on a stationary bicycle. It's much better than missing a training session altogether.
Lindsay, a question came through earlier about missing a training session. I can't for the life of me find it. We're getting tons of questions in, but the question basically was along the lines of, if you miss a training session, do you need to try and catch it up, or is it water under the bridge? Do you let it go and carry on as per normal?
Look, it always depends for me. As a general rule, I say don't catch up. Okay, that's my default position, don't catch up. But it does depend a little bit on what session it is that you've missed. So if you're on a 4-day-a-week training program and you miss one of your shorter runs, that is easy to make up on another day. When you miss your long runs, that becomes problematic, because if you then try and catch up a long run, it means you're probably going to be squeezing it between 2 long runs. That makes it 3 long runs, and it becomes too risky. So if you miss a long run, then you can perhaps still look to make up a session, but I wouldn't try and make that session up. So if there was an hour and a half scheduled, you may rather go and do a 40 to 50 minute easy run on another day. But as a general rule, if you miss it, it's gone. If you miss a training session every 3 to 4 to 5 weeks, you know, it's literally that infrequent. It will make not a difference at all on your training program. If you find that you are missing literally 1 session per week, that becomes problematic, and then you perhaps need to sit down and look at your week and go, okay, how can I structure my week differently so that I can get to these 4 runs?
Lindsay, a couple of questions coming through as well, with a few people who are struggling with injuries, and there was one earlier who's had serious surgery and has been told no running. People asking, like, when is the latest they can start training for Comrades? What are your thoughts on sort of trying to overcome an injury and get ready for the big day?
So for me, I think the latest you can physically start training for Comrades is probably the beginning of March. If you are able to do other forms of cardiovascular exercise like spinning, elliptical, swimming, then I think from March you can build up slowly but surely and steadily, and you'll have a really good chance of finishing Comrades. If you're literally starting from scratch on the 1st of March, it's possible, but then I think you're going to struggle. It's like literally each sort of step is going to be like you're just going to make it through that hurdle, just going to make it through that. So it's going to be stressful, never mind whether you'll actually be successful or not. I sort of feel like for you to have a successful, relatively stress-free Comrades campaign, you're in that boat, you kind of want to be starting to run now. So you, even if it's only a little bit, but you kind of want to be starting to run now. At the very least, you should be able to do cross training.
Cool. Lindsay, there's a couple of questions, and they all sort of tie together. So the first one has got to do with nutrition. Somebody asking is how important is nutrition in the build-up to Comrades, and what should they be focusing on? So, and that's just ordinary everyday nutrition. And then someone else was asking about making sure you're doing the right things on your training run nutrition-wise that you can then duplicate on race day. What are your thoughts on nutrition?
Yeah, so I'm going to give some what I believe is good advice now, but also if you are in South Africa and listening to this, then I strongly urge you to get to a roadshow in your area, because I am traveling around with a dietitian, and she's giving really good comprehensive advice on this topic. If you are a female living in South Africa, get onto the Comrades website and look for the ladies seminar, because we will also have a dietitian there doing that. So my advice around nutrition is not complicated. My advice is that you need to pay a little bit of attention to what you're putting into your mouth, and as soon as people start to pay attention to what they're doing, then the what you should be eating becomes a lot easier, because most of us have a reasonable idea what is healthy. There's not a lot of people that don't know that vegetables are a good idea, for example. So what I advise people to do is to plan, because that's the one thing that can make all of this much easier. So plan so that you have what you need in your house. I'm all for fresh prepared. If you prepare it yourself, you also know what's going into it. When you buy pre-prepared stuff, you don't know how it was cooked. It could have had all the nutrition cooked out of it, tons of sugar and flavorants, etc., added to it. So plan ahead, eat fresh produce. If you do that, it's quite difficult to go wrong. You're then looking at having 3 meals a day, maybe some snacks, maybe you don't need snacks. That'll depend on you as an individual. A little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, a little bit of vegetables, a little bit of carbohydrates. If you have a little bit of everything, you're going to be fine. Okay. In terms of recovery nutrition, if I do a very hard workout, and what do I classify as very hard workouts? Anything lasting longer than an hour and a half, any races, time trials, interval work, hill work. Any of those things to me constitute a hard training session, and then I will encourage people to take in a carbohydrate drink or a recovery shake if they want to go down that road. But the important thing is to take that within 15 to 30 minutes of exercise. Otherwise, it just becomes excess calories, because your body doesn't absorb and process them and store them in the muscles as we would like to if you take it too long after exercise. And then finally, race nutrition is simple yet complicated. It's simple because we know what we need. We need roughly 1 gram of carbohydrates per hour of exercise when we are exercising. Now, if you're an 80 kg human being, 80 grams of carbohydrates in an hour is an enormous amount of carbohydrates to take in. If you were going to take that in for Comrades and you're going to be a 10 to 11 hour Comrades runner, you are going to feel sick. But we also know that we start out with a good hour and a half to 2 hours of stores, and at Comrades intensities, probably 2.5 to 3 hours of stores. So that means that our actual requirement is probably 20 or so, maybe a bit more, but call it roughly 20 grams per hour less. So for the average person running Comrades, you're looking at trying to put in somewhere in the region of 45 to 60 grams per hour. That's a lot easier, much more manageable. But you do have to experiment with the things that you like. So if you're going to be using gels or shots or chews or tablets or dissolvable tablets, you need to physically try these things out, and you will eventually find the ones that taste the best, make you feel the best, that you perform the best on, and it is a bit of a trial and error. In terms of fluids, you will have Energade and you will have Coke on the side of the road provided by the Comrades Marathon Association. So you also want to try these things out. Now, Energade for the internationals is close enough to Gatorade that if you can stomach Gatorade on a marathon, you'd probably be fine with Energade come race day. And yeah, and try using Coke a few times on the races. All the other stuff, the gels, fizzies, all those things you're going to have to provide yourself. And the other thing you'll get en route at Comrades is potato crisps, potatoes, like little baby new potatoes chopped in half, lightly salted. There'll be bananas. So also on the very long runs, experiment with small amounts of solids to have a look and see how it feels in your stomach. Because if you don't like it, chances are you won't like it on race day, and that's not a good time to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay, there were a couple of other things you wanted to run through, particularly around planning races and seeding.
Yeah, so look, I think some of it I've covered already. But again, comrade seeding isn't important, and I think it's good for me to put it into perspective because a lot of people get quite wound up about comrade seeding, and that is why they find themselves going to the Vol Marathon, which is a flat marathon, and then chasing a seeding when they are in fact already supposed to be in flat out training. So if you are in G and H, it is tough. Okay, I'm not going to pull any punches. G and H, you take an enormous amount of time to get over the start line. And for our international audience, unfortunately, we do not do mat to mat timing, we do gun to mat. So that means when the gun goes off, the clock is ticking. And if you are in H, on the up run, you are looking at around about 8 to 9 minutes that you're going to lose crossing the start line. G, you're looking in the region of 4 to 9 minutes at really worst case scenario. For everyone else, you're looking as we move further and further forward, it gets much less concerning. I mean, you're down in the Fs, you're probably under 4 minutes. E's, you at around 2 minutes. C seeding, you're not even at a minute and a half. B's are 30, 40 seconds. So seeding actually is not that important for most people besides the G's and H's. And to be honest, if you just qualified in a marathon, to make up 20 minutes at your next marathon is huge. And then ultimately what you have to think about is, what am I gaining by racing another marathon? So if you manage to move up one whole seeding pen, what you're saving yourself on race day is about 2 minutes. You're saving yourself 2 minutes on race day, but the time that you lose in training, recovering from that marathon, you could get yourself a whole lot more than 2 minutes fit. And that's one of the main reasons why I feel people really waste their time chasing seeding. Why is over racing harmful? Well, very simply because in Comrades we only find out at about 60 Ks if we are tired. And if you're racing every weekend, you're going to get a lot of positive feedback. Programs working, I'm running fast, I'm doing really good times. But every time you race, you lay down a little bit more fatigue and a little bit more fatigue and a little bit more fatigue. And when you race anything of 30 Ks and longer, then you put in quite deep seated fatigue. But because you're so fit, when you do easy runs, you don't feel that fatigue at 30 Ks, 40 Ks. You only feel it at Comrades. So once you've done your qualifier, it's okay to run a couple of hard, again, I'll use park run as a classic example, or to run a hard 10K race, perhaps a half marathon hard somewhere, but you don't want to race higher than that. And sorry, I've jumped ahead to the next point already. How to minimize risk yet still track progress. You go and race a short distance around about once a month. And by doing a short distance, that loading is quite low. You recover from it really quickly, and it doesn't sit in your legs on Comrades race day.
Yeah, and it's a nice confidence boost, Lindsay. I know Bruce Fordyce used to say that if, I don't know the exact time he used to speak of, but he used to race an 8K time trial, and he knew that when he was hitting certain times, then he was ready for Comrades.
No, exactly, and it was, I think, 24 minutes and a couple of seconds. I can't remember the exact number, and it was on the Wanderers or RAC course. When he ran that time, he knew he was in shape to win Comrades.
Yeah, that's for an 8K. When I do 24 minutes for a 4K, then I know I'm ready for Comrades.
Bruce was.
All right. So we are running out of time rapidly, so I'm just going to shoot through a couple more questions, if that's cool with you, Lindsay, because there are tons of them. One of the questions that came through, and I think it's a goodie too, you mentioned earlier on about the 30K runs, particularly the guys and girls who are chasing the Vic Clapham. You mentioned either 2 marathons or an ultra, or 1 marathon and 2 ultras. Those 30K long runs, how many of those do you reckon somebody should do between the 1st of January and Comrades? Is it that easy to put a number on it?
Yeah, look, between the first, I'll put a number on it between the 1st of March and Comrades. You're probably looking at around six runs of about 30 Ks, because that then means that you'll have done close to 10, call it 6 or 7, and that means that in a 12-week period, you'll have done 9 runs of between 30 and 50 kilometers, and then you will be ready for Comrades.
Okay, great question from Tommy. Tommy wants to know, what about intimacy with your partner the night before the race? Bruce Fordyce has got a classic line, isn't he?
Yes, and I think Bruce Fordyce actually has the best answer. I can't really give a better answer than that. You know, getting action the night before Comrades is no problem at all, unless you have to go out looking for it. Then there's a problem. Then it's going to affect your running performance the next day. So look, there have been heaps of studies, and there are some studies that indicate that for men, it does have a slightly detrimental effect on performance, and on women, it actually has a positive impact on performance. But if the night before Comrades, you are so damn nervous and all the rest of it, if it helps you to relax and to get some sleep, then I reckon it's better than abstaining because of the very slight disadvantage as a male.
Cool. Great question here too, because I know a lot of our international runners run a lot of trail, but this one's from Van Jonas. Van is saying he's running his first Comrades. What are your thoughts regarding doing trail running, 15 to 20 kilometer races, including a 40 kilometer sky marathon on the 25th of March?
So in terms of the timing, 25th of March is not bad. So no, I don't have a problem, and I also don't have a problem at all with doing or using trail running as training for Comrades. Obviously, there is the risk of turning ankles and that kind of thing, but that's it's a worthwhile risk in my opinion. Trail running makes you pretty strong. I would just say that some of your training and running needs to be on tar. If you do all of your running off-road, when you get onto the very hard tar and get to 60 kilometers, your legs really will be quite beat up from it. But no, trail running is a great way to train for endurance sports.
Such a great question from Kirsten, Lindsay, saying, I'm not sure, it's my first up run, not sure what to expect with regards to the difference between the up and down. We've got a lot of people going for back-to-back. What, in your mind, is the difference between the two? Somebody's run the down, they know what that's like. What's the up like?
Look, they're very different in terms of how you use energy. So on the down run, it's less about how much energy you use. So the down run has a lot of climbing in the first 30 Ks, but the climbing is much more gradual in nature. And so therefore your energy use is quite a lot lower. And then, of course, in the second half, there are loads of downhills, long, steep downhills. So your energy use is a lot lower on the down, but the pounding and the high impact on your quads really takes its toll. The down run gets quite painful towards the end. Is the up run really just uses a lot of energy. And the climbing in the first 36 Ks is a lot more severe than the climbing in the first 30 Ks of the down run. And so you have to be careful about how you mete out your energy. And honestly, you can't run slow enough. I mean, people, when I say that to people, they're like, they don't really understand what I'm saying. But the more energy you save, the more walking you do, the better off you'll be in the second half, because the second half of the up run, there are just loads of really nice, long, gradual downhills with some shorter, like lumpy little climbs. But you've got to play a little bit of a daring game with yourself. Get as close to those cutoffs as you dare to get. And in terms of if you're chasing a faster medal, to actually get behind that medal in the first 36 Ks, and just trust that from 50 Ks until you get to little pollies, you are just going to be able to shove so much time in the bag. So those are the main differences for me between the two.
Awesome stuff. Just some resources I wanted to share with you. I mentioned at the start of the webinar that the Comrades.com has got all of Lindsay's training programs. If you don't have a training program, literally go and download them. They're free. And I follow it to the T. I know a lot of people do as well. And as I said at the beginning of the webinar too, is if you decide you're going to follow Lindsay's program, then follow Lindsay's program and follow Lindsay's advice. The last thing you want to do is try and drive around the city of New York with maps of London, and that's what could possibly turn out, you could turn out doing if you end up following someone else's program asking Lindsay for advice or vice versa. So CoachParry.com is Lindsay's website that you can get to as well. And then, as Lindsay mentioned, the Bonitas Comrades Road shows, smack bang in the middle. The whole schedule is on the Comrades website. He also, so if you want some nutrition advice, go check out the website. Bonitas Novice Project seminars, which are great for the newbies if you're a novice running your very first Comrades, or if it's your first up run. Even though you've done one, they are two very different races. Get to the Novice Project seminars, and as Lindsay said, the ladies seminars. First one, I think, Lindsay, you said this weekend.
Correct, in Pretoria.
And there are some tickets available. Just get hold of Comrades if you want to find out more. I mentioned the training programs. There are generic programs. That's the URL to get to comrades.com/marathon center/training. There's one for all the different medals, finishes, bronze, Vic Clapham, bronze, Bill Rowan, and for the Racing Snakes, there's silver as well. If you're looking for an individualized program, if you want something more tailored, you can get to coachparry.com/running coaching packages for the various coaching packages, depending on how much input you need as well. So go check those out. The next Comrades Marathon webinar happening on Monday, the 27th of February at exactly the same time. So You booked in. If you've registered for this one, you booked in automatically for that one, so don't stress about it. You'll get reminders. If you know of someone else who's running Comrades and they could benefit from these, please do tell them about it. The website to get to register is coachparry.com/webinar. That's where you can find out those details as well. So, Lindsay, that's pretty much it for tonight. I know we're slightly over time. We said we were going to run it for an hour. It's almost 10 past. We started a few minutes late. So, it does seem that we are sorted everything out. Andre saying, should I race 2 Oceans in April? We've answered that one already, Andre. The short answer is no if you're running Comrades. If Oceans is your A race, then go and race it. Lindsay, correct?
Absolutely, 100%. Couldn't have answered better myself.
Cool, awesome stuff. Bix van Deventer saying, just remember, burpees hate you too. So there we go. There's some a bit of motivation, to end tonight. The replay will be up on the Comrades website. We'll send an email out if there's stuff that you missed. If you've got any questions, be in touch via social media. Lindsay Parry ZA is Lindsay's Twitter handle. You can get hold of me at Big Brad Brown. We're also on Facebook and the works as well. So thanks for joining us tonight. Much appreciated. And happy training. If you've got a qualifier coming up between now and the next webinar, as I do, best of luck. And we'll see you at the end of Feb. Looking forward to it. Lindsay, thanks for your time. Any parting shots from you?
Just again, if I can't stress enough that there are still 5 months to Comrades. That can sometimes feel like there's not a lot of time, but there is. Right now, all we're really doing is creating habit, creating consistency, and getting the body ready for the 1st of March. We will start training for Comrades proper 1st of March.
Awesome stuff. Have yourself a great one. Take care.